Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. There is a growing contempt for members of law enforcement who serve communities by keeping them safe. Disrespect for authority of any kind, teachers, politicians, parents, police, and military, is rising throughout the Western world. How can civil society keep the rule of law if the people sworn to uphold it are constantly under attack? The blame seems to be slanted towards so-called toxic masculinity or patriarchal religious systems, as Bill Gates' wife suggests when her, quote, "disrespect for women grows when religions are dominated by men." She believes without question that the disrespect for women embodied male-dominated religion is a factor in laws and customs that keep women down. Yet Christianity has done more to set women free than to subjugate them, and this does nothing to answer the larger question of disrespect. According to award-winning author and military wife Karen Whiting, the breakdown of the family plays a critical role in how we view authority. God has created the family as a microcosm of society, and when it suffers, authority in general suffers as a result. Her new book, 52 Weekly Devotions for Families Called to Serve, she says, "I understand the uniqueness of families who serve and the interruptions of family times due to emergency and calls to serve. There are also opportunities to develop character in your children." She cites the complexities of families who serve in some capacity. These include isolation, stress, fear, uncertainty, and sometimes even ridicule and abuse by those they're trying to serve. In other words, people in positions to serve have come under unprecedented attack for no good reason except they represent some form of authority. When Islamic terrorists attacked America in 2001, more than 400 firemen, police officers, and EMTs lost their lives, risking their lives to save others. Since then, rather than bolstering respect for servicemen and women, the pendulum has swung the other direction. Whiting's book is designed to encourage families of those who serve to build and reinforce them when they feel isolated and mocked. She suggests ways to help celebrate faithful service, create a family mission statement, foster kindness, gratitude, and positive attitudes in the midst of animosity. Karen Whiting at www.karenwhiting.com is an international speaker, former television host, and award-winning author of 26 books, including the best-selling God's Girls and the 1 Year My Princess Devotions. She's written more than 700 articles for more than 60 publications, currently writing for Leading Hearts, Crosswalk.com, and The Christian Communicator. Karen is a widow, the mother of 5, including 2 rocket scientists. Here to discuss her new book, 52 Weekly Devotions for Families Called to Serve, is Karen Whiting. Karen, welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to delve into this area where we just don't have a spotlight shining on the change in attitude towards this incredible disrespect that's being bred in America towards anybody in authority, in uniform, in public service, and how that trickles down to the suffering of the children and the family members. And I'll be candid with you, I've never really thought about it, never considered it until your book came and said this is a huge issue. This is one that the media is not covering. We're not talking about it. The families are suffering. I'm sure that counselors are inundated with this as an issue. I don't know what the counseling community's response to it is, but people who are in positions of authority and service are under constant attack. Firemen, policemen, military servicemen are constantly being derided in public restaurants, being refused service. Our local policemen, I remember growing up in the 50s, we had a beat cop in our neighborhood named Max. Everybody knew Max. Everybody loved Max. He was a part of everybody's family. He would come into your home Somebody would prepare brownies for him. Somebody would have gifts, and everybody would have a gift for him at the holidays because he was there to protect our little community. And so he would just walk around. You'd see him when you walked to school. You'd see him when you walked home from school. You saw him in the local shopping area. Everybody knew Max. This was somebody who was revered, loved. He was the one that would grab my ear when he caught me shoplifting Necco wafers, all right? And leaned down and said, I can take you to jail, I can call your mom, or you can put that back and never do it again. What are you going to do? So slowly I put it back and never shoplifted again. But he was there out of respect. How are you raised? How was your journey to faith and your upbringing? How did it influence you to come to this point of realizing that there is a desperate need, especially for the innocent child whose parent happens to serve?
I was raised with faith in a small rural community with lots of family. My grandfather was the fire chief and had a lifetime appointment as fire chief because he founded the fire department after he was head of the bucket brigade when they would just try to have buckets of water to douse a fire. And I, was always taught to respect him and other people, the family, friends, and relatives who were in law enforcement and everything. My father had served during World War II, so I understood some things about service because he was so patriotic. And then when I married someone in the Coast Guard, I really did not know what that would involve and the moves and everything, as we had and raised 5 children and went from Connecticut to Hawaii to Michigan to Florida, crossing the country a few times. That was very interesting, and finding out each time we all had to make new friends. Our children had to make friends. They had to fit into a new school system, all of that, and realized that was a big difference. But now in modern times, I'm seeing that disrespect just increasing. I did, during Vietnam War, see the people disrespecting military, and it really took a long time for our Vietnam vets to receive any appreciation, any thank you, any respect. They were spit on in airports. My husband couldn't wear his uniform during those days when he was outside in civilian areas, but it was isolated to just those military who, many of them were drafted. They didn't even choose to serve. Nowadays, these people in the military have chosen to serve, and they're getting this disrespect. Well, they don't get it as much as they still get all that moving and everything. The law enforcement is getting the brunt of it now, and their suicide rate has been going up. Their divorce rate has been increasing. Military divorce rates are higher than the general public, and you see that because of the stress on the families.
Why isn't this more talked about? Why is this not a subject which is being addressed from the pulpit? I don't think I've ever heard a sermon in regards to this. We read in the paper about policemen being refused service at a restaurant by somebody that has an issue with law enforcement, and we don't see a statement coming out by the owners of Arby's, by the owners of McDonald's, by the major corporations saying that we support our service members and this behavior will not be tolerated, and that there are active campaigns. And they're the key influencers. If I'm an employee and I deny service and it stays with my local manager and maybe the local news picks it up and the corporation doesn't do anything and doesn't take on their corporate citizenship role, then what message does that send?
Right, that's not a good message. Now, we did just have Veterans Day, in which certain restaurants and places were very good to the military, gave service people and the retirees free meals. And I think we should certainly support and go to those places, Golden Corral and everyone else who did that. You can look that up online and see it, because if we patronize those who are respecting those who serve us, that sends a message. But the other thing is, we have media that actually doesn't respect the people who serve, the politicians that don't agree with them, and other people, and that does not help. We have families that should be the core place where we teach respect, but many people instead say someone has to earn their respect. I was taught God created them and we respect them because of authority and because the image of God is within them. But if we don't have that, as we have less people of faith, then that adds to the disrespect in society. But we do need, as a family, each of us, to respect and show that respect. Instead of coming home because you got a ticket from the police that you deserved because you did break the law, you disparage and you say bad things and negative things about the police. You don't take your own responsibility and own up and say, yeah, I went too fast, or yes, I went through a light thinking I could make it. And admitting that you are responsible, it sends a message to your children that we don't need to respect someone, even if we did break the law.
Well, you're exactly right. In raising your children, what were some of the things that you found in common with other families that were like yours, which were being uprooted and moved? And was there a subculture of families of military? I mentioned that my daughter lives down by the Pensacola Naval Base, and there are families that are constantly moving in and out of her neighborhood. She only has a 3.5-month-old baby, so it's not really impacting her friendships, the baby's friendships, but my daughter's just getting established and looking for friends and finding people, and she'll get to know them, and then all of a sudden a week later they get orders and they're moving. And they'll call her up and say, hey, do you need a king-size mattress? Because they have to pay for their own move. They pay by weight. So they are constantly reducing weight. There's a whole subculture of people who are exchanging furniture and unloading things, and then they go to the new location. Somebody is trying to offload their stuff so they don't have to pay the moving costs, and it's become a whole subculture. But the kids are all impacted by this, and there is that need. So how is it manifesting in our children? First of all, outside of service members' children, how are regular non-service related children being raised and taught by parents who are disrespectful to law enforcement or to people in uniform or to people in authority? And then how does that carry over to the children who are sitting right next to them in class as a movie or a discussion opens up about this particular area, and it's talking about their mom or their dad, and it's got to be very uncomfortable.
Yes, and you've touched on so many different issues. The law enforcement, some of my friends who are in law enforcement actually live a town or two away from where the beat is, so that their children are not as impacted by your own dad is a police officer that may impact what my parents do, or I may see them out and about. I don't know if that's good or bad, because you do have the part where you knew the local police officer. I knew the local police law enforcement people in my town, and we did respect them and honored them. But sometimes you have to decide, I can best protect my family by moving them out of this circle so that they won't be put down. And I will say that those families, especially if they're of faith, are very close-knit. Our family was close-knit with 5 children. They had each other as friends, and they still do. We'll gather together for Thanksgiving and Christmas as they come to my home to celebrate. And my oldest son, my oldest son-in-law both served, one in the Army, one in the Air Force. So they had that for a time. They were both medically retired, which is another whole issue. There is a subculture of those people who move, and in the Coast Guard, where it's a smaller service, you can end up moving back to friends you were with 2 stations ago. And that's really exciting when that happens, because you know them and you're so happy to be with them again. If you're in, I was in Officer Christian Fellowship, so that type of group, we could move to another station right ahead of time and be welcomed by the people that knew we would flow right into their Bible study, and their children would be ready to welcome our children. But it can be difficult, especially in some of the services where you can go from here to Okinawa to Germany, and all over the world, where there's different languages around you and everything else. You do also have those children who all of a sudden their neighbors are gone, that they were friends with, because they didn't understand in the military, they would move again. The children in that family knew, will move again. They didn't know. And thankfully today we have Skype, like we're on here. We have online ways of communicating with them in FaceTime to keep up with those friends. It's not the same as being there and playing together, but it helps with that separation a bit. And I think that within the family, you do have that core, which you say, we are together. When we move, and because daddy or mommy has this commitment, and we are committed as a family, and you have to think of it that way. Because of it, we will do this together. And just think of the adventure we have. We get to see new places. Children of the military know the global map better than other children do. They understand travel and certain things, so they get some advantages, even though they get those disadvantages of relationships. And children who may have, if they move even more, where they have 3 or 4 schools in 2 years, that can be very disruptive to their education. So a number of military that have more moves are doing more homeschooling just to survive and keep the children in a more of a continuity of their education. So there are different choices they can have. But we have to look at the uniqueness of our family and say, how are we going to face this? What help can we have? And you'll find you have that network of support with the other people that share that common calling. My neighbor down the street in the last place I lived, the dad was a firefighter. He was 3 days on, 3 days off, never home on the same day of the week, except so many weeks apart. And they had to refer to the calendar before they said yes or no to play dates with their friends, because maybe that was the day their dad was home. And they wanted time with their dad, and mom would say, we can't do it. Dad's home. We really want to be together. And they looked forward to dad being there. So, they understood it. But you do have to help them with the calendars, the timing, the maps, to understand what their life is like and embrace what's really good about it.
The churches that are in these communities, especially military bases, Coast Guard, what have you, do they specifically minister to this particular area? Have you found that they are trained, qualified, focused, that they're providing in their youth groups? They're talking about these kind of transplantation issues, as well as what do you do about when the kids read that a military person in uniform was spit on or denied service or treated disrespectfully, and they read about it, they heard about it, or saw it on TV. Are they addressing that at that level?
It depends. A number of churches where they have a lot of military are doing that. Military bases often have a chapel, and some families choose to go there because they know all the families there will understand their circumstances. But then they sometimes feel like, well, we're keeping our children in a bubble. Should we spread out more? And again, you have those choices to make. I know in one location we were in the local church, but towards the end, when it was getting time to move, we switched to the chapel because we felt like that was more supportive of the upcoming move for us and more understanding for them. So you do have that happening. And what was nice is on Veterans Day weekend, I was visiting a friend. I was up in Georgia because I had some speaking and things going on. And that church had a dinner that day after church for the military families. and the other people were serving them. And that's just really nice to see that they do that, that they acknowledge that they had each of the members who served or had served at any time in their life stand up front so they could be prayed over and recognize their service. And when a church does that, of course, anyone in whatever industry they're of service that they're recognizing feels so much more welcomed and at ease, and that they can share what happens in their lives.
There are certainly some unique problems in absenteeism, the danger that many of the parents face. If your father or mother is a police officer, if your mother or father are deployed overseas in a battle area, there is always the potential for injury, loss of life, all those things. There's a whole different set of challenges which face the young people that they're having to be introduced to, and you can't insulate them from it, because if you do that, then the shock, if and when it comes, is so totally unsettling and so totally unexpected that there is no cushion, there is no margin, if you will. So how do you create an environment for, and can we quantify how many children in the United States are impacted by parents who are in some form of service, whether or not it's fire, police, EMT, armed services, FBI? There's a lot of law enforcement, and a lot of there's people who are work in the prison system. There are people who work in the court system as bailiffs. There are sheriffs. There are police officers. There are EMTs. There are firemen. It's a much larger base than I think that we might consider. Do you have any statistical data on that?
I don't have it in front of me, and the more people you put in, the more families that are impacted. I do know when you mentioned, do they have places on base for those in the military, that a friend of my daughter, that father was the first one killed in Afghanistan after 9/11. That mother had 2 little children, and as soon as the Marine Corps came to knock on the door and say, "Your husband died," the paparazzi came immediately afterwards and scared that little boy, who was only a toddler, so much that he spent 6 months crawling under his bed every night and crying or screaming for an hour. She has become a grief counselor because she understands it. And so many times you will find on those bases counselors who help that either grew up in a military family or are in one, and they really do understand. And that gives them the compassion that they need and helps them greatly. As a fire chief's granddaughter, I can recall one time I was in bed, but I was not asleep. And it was late at night that my grandfather stopped at the house because he was so sad and felt so bad that one person that they responded to, a car that flipped over, by the time the fire engine got there, it was only 2 miles away. It had burned up so badly, the man died. There was no way that they could rescue him. And he felt bad. And when he mentioned the name, I knew it was the father of my best friend who had died. And that she would think that the firemen didn't save his life. They absolutely could not. And that introduced me to the real dangers and the death and the people they're trying to save. Sometimes you can't save them. An EMT who responds to heart attacks and other things, sometimes they can save them. Sometimes it's too late by the time they're called and they arrive. And we have all of those complications too. And they feel great compassion for the people they're trying to save. And a lot of people don't understand it. They just think this is a job for them. It's so much more than a job. And that's part of what we have to understand. That's why families who don't serve, if they read a book like this, Called to Serve with their children, they start getting a glimpse into what it's like to serve, what it's like for those people. They might, when they're young, think, I want to be a firefighter because I get to wear the hat and ride the truck. And when they see this side of it, they get to see a more complete picture of what it's really like to serve and to be called to serve and feel this is what God wants me to do with my life. That's important too. But the danger is real. We cannot isolate them because we don't know when something will happen. We never know that. And it's better instead to build a great trust in God and to be thankful for every day we do have together.
Well, you bring out some very, very key points, and they're incredible prayer points. Obviously, there's a great need for a strong faith foundation, something for them to be able to lean on. There needs to be a greater awareness of our youth pastors. They may have children in their youth groups whose parents are serving in some capacity, and they're not really made aware. And there needs to be a level of awareness. I confess I was completely ignorant to this being an area of need that I would have never addressed from a congregational perspective. I would have never addressed from a social justice perspective. When Don called me and said to me, I want to pitch an idea to you about another devotional, I was like, the world does not need another devotional. I get pitches for about 1,000 devotionals a year. And he said, this one's different. He said, here's what's different about this one. And I said, this I have to have on, because this opens up an area where I think that the average Christian is completely ignorant. They have no awareness whatsoever of the crying need, of the gaping wound that exists in the homes and the hearts of families whose husbands or wives are in the service, public service and armed services area, putting their lives on the line, and how that can possibly impact the discussion points of what we need to show them the need for God and God's part in protecting, and not just in protecting, but when there is an injury, when there is a fatality, when there are these things, we're having to prepare children. My parents didn't prepare me for the death of a loved one. Nobody was in harm's way. So when my grandmother passed away, she was the first. I was already in my 20s. That was the first time I had anything to do with anybody passing away. I didn't know what to think. I had no preparation whatsoever for how to think, how to feel, how to respond, what the concept was, because it was never discussed. We didn't know anybody who died. We might have heard of somebody's parent passed away, but we weren't close to it. The parents might have been close, but they insulated it. The 50s. The kids weren't involved in anything. It's different today. We are aware of the needs of the children, and that's why it's so important that we have resources like this. We're talking with Karen Whiting, author of a new devotion, 52 weekly devotions for families called to serve. We're all aware of the gross amount of disrespect being heaped upon those who are in the military, those who are in the police force, those in the fire department, those who are being denied service at restaurants, who are being spit upon at assemblies and rallies, who are being signaled out for being people in authority, doing a job where they are willing to put their lives on the line. And Jesus said, no greater gift than this, than for one man to lay down his life for another. And each one of these people have been called to this service. This is not a default position. You have to work pretty hard to earn the title firefighter. You have to go through a lot of training, through a lot of examination, through physical rigors in order to do that, to be an EMT, to serve in any military officer position. You go through training. Just to be a private, You've got to go through basic training before you become a private first class. So there's all kinds of investment which is being made, and it's a whole family is engaged in this calling and this investment, and I don't think we've paid enough attention to them. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig in to some of the topical areas these devotions cover and how they can impact the well-being and the personal relationship with Messiah for these families who are called to serve. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Karen Whiting, author of the new devotional, 52 weekly devotions for families called to serve. Karen, welcome back to this segment.
It's been great to talk with you today.
Well, it's great talking to you. There are unique and special challenges for families of those who serve. As I confess to you, I never for one moment thought about the special needs of those families. And your book of devotions is targeted to help shore up those critical areas in those families that are not being addressed by people who are completely unaware of those needs. But you've lived that life, so you are intimately familiar with your 5 children of what those needs were. So kind of take me through the genesis of the development of the devotion. what areas that you emphasize, what you cover, and how you feel that it's equipping families to be able to face some of the challenges that they're facing that we're not going to change human nature. I was a child of the 60s and the 50s and then early 70s in college, as I finished my college career in the early 70s, who did not have respect for the Vietnam vet. We held them responsible for our role in Vietnam, which was misplaced. Our message was good. Our delivery was horrible. And I've apologized on Veterans Day every year for 40 years for the way we treated our returning Vietnam vets. They were just doing a job they didn't want to do in a place they didn't want to do it for a cause that they didn't believe in either. But they were performing their duty and what they were sworn to do, which was to defend America, whether right or wrong, should we be there or not be there. They were doing what they were instructed to do, and they were due respect for that, and we did not give that to them. And for that I regret, on behalf of my generation, the way we received them. This idea of laying down one's life for another is incredibly important, incredibly significant. And there are people who put themselves in the line of danger, and put their lives on the line every day they get up in the morning and they leave the house, much more so than the average person. This devotion was written to them and for them. So talk to me about the thought process, the genesis, and the focal areas, and what you hope to accomplish within those families, and what the residual effect will be, because there will be a residual effect that will come from this when you have children that are equipped to respond and have confidence and faith that they did not have before.
Yes, well, I think one thing from the book that is in my heart always is to help develop a servant heart and help families be open to discussion of whatever is an issue for their family. I can recall a time my husband came home, sat down with the family, we had devotions, and he said, I want to share something that happened today because it shows what I believe. He was in mass transit going into work when a young girl came up to him, college age probably, and started berating the military and what he was doing and everything. And he looked at her when she finally stopped talking and said, you know what? I will continue to put down my life every day so that you will still have the freedom to say what you said, even to me. And that stopped her, it silenced her from saying anything. And he said, because people don't understand. And if I remind them that I am willing to die for them, to die so they can say disrespectful things, sometimes it causes them to at least think about it. And so there is that type of thing where he was willing to share that with our children because we did devotions. I did them with my own children, starting with my oldest being 2 years old, because it was the way to not have chaos around us and to bring faith in the home and weave it into our life. That's what I want to do. In this book, every week there is a focus. I think that's good to do. And because families can be busy, because dad might be in and out of the home or mom due to work, it's nice to line it up as a week that you can look and say, okay, there's a family beatitude. There is a focus of what the week is going to be about. And so on one that's called Lifelines, the family beatitude is, happy is the family who will seek help, for they will find a lifeline. And the focus is helping in emergencies. The Bible verse is from Matthew 7:7, ask and it will be given unto you. The activities in there is to practice making a 911 call, talk about the importance of that, practice an emergency response, teaching some basic first aid to your children in the home. So it's really practical hands. Some weeks are a little more service, a little more fun. Some weeks are a little more practical, depending on what we need. And this story, there's always a story that's just 2 minutes to read. That particular story is a child calling 911. The EMTs and the 911 operator keeps them on the line. The EMTs have an extra person in their vehicle, so when they arrive, they have someone to be with that child while they take care of the father. They saved the father's life in that particular instance, and they were all happy about that. But they, even en route, were concerned about that child who called, as well as the person in trouble. There's a Bible story connection of Jesus responding to an emergency when Jairus pleads for help for his servant who's in trouble from Mark 5. And then there are little chat prompts that really talk about different things, about fear, about having peace, and how a friend loves at all times. They are there to help when trouble comes, from Proverbs 17:17, to help build the child's faith, to know there are people who want to help you. You can find them. In our society, we can make one call to find that help that we need, which is great. There's also a scrapbook prayer journal, because I believe these families, since they face danger, they don't know if that person's going to be alive tomorrow. If we start scrapbooking every week, the response is what we've chatted about, and there's some little icons of drawing ideas you can put into it. You have a faith legacy your children will always have from that year, that time that you spent in faith together, and remember what the person who served did. Okay, there's a frontline tip that specifically is for that family who serves. In this case, those tips are for the EMTs, and thanking the EMTs who help. And there's a prayer and a little wrap-up. But every week is a different aspect of what happens with a different story. Sometimes it's seeing a family being served. Sometimes it's the family who's serving. There's another story about an EMT that's so exhausted at work because they had so many calls that the father and daughter showed up during their break time with that person's favorite shake, just to thank that person. They knew they couldn't be home. They were working, but they wanted to let them know, we care, we're praying for you. Because within your own family, you can give great respect and honor those people. Outside of that, you can remind people that, my mom or my dad serves, and they do it because they care about people. That helps. At home, we always turned off the media if they'd said anything disparaging about other people. Politicians, law enforcement, anything. That was not something we wanted to listen to when we said, we don't agree with what the news is saying here. And we need to do more of that and not cheer or keep that tuned in.
You have segmented the book in kind of an interesting way, at least from my observation, that it starts out by explaining what it is that the family member does, that why there's a need for it, how it fits into society, an understanding of the calling as to this isn't just a job, this is something that they're called to do. So it actually elevates the position to that's just a little bit, the accountant goes to work and his biggest threat is a paper cut. The policeman goes to work and his biggest threat, of course, is a shootout. You go into compassion, and there's a compassion message contained throughout, because there, in this area of service, there is also an aspect of a victim that's involved, a person who passed away and the EMT was trying to serve them, or someone who died in the fire, or died in the car wreck, or died in the plane crash, or died in the field of battle. So this underlying theme of developing a sense of compassion for those who serve, but also for the ones that they serve. So it's kind of a duality. I need to be sensitive to and aware of what my parent does, but when there is somebody else involved that they are performing their job for, to, or with, I must have compassion for them as well. And it's not just I'm praying for Daddy. I'm praying for the people that Daddy serves. I'm praying for the community that Daddy serves in. I'm praying for their protection so that Daddy doesn't come into harm's way. But in order for him to avoid harm's way, then people have to not be in harm's way. And so it's kind of a micro to a macro, back to a micro view of understanding how all this is so interrelated, and how much of a cycle and how connected each one of these people who serve are to the scriptures that says faith without works is death, and we have to be the hands and feet of Messiah, and how the person who is in this is called to serve are the hands and feet of Messiah, and are ministering to, and through that ministry could bring somebody not only back from death or from harm, but also possibly into salvation. And so that is a larger healing, a larger aspect and underlying theme of the devotion, is to build the faith of the family, to be intercessors for not just the family member, but for the community in which the family serves. So this can get very complicated.
Yes, it can. And in fact, there's one, I think it's titled, I know the story is titled Siren Calls. And that's of a family, a dear friend of mine, whose husband is a firefighter in California, which they've had so many near-death and dangerous situations. They actually had friends who were firefighters who lost their homes in some of these fires. And the little girl, at one point when the mother, they hear a siren and they pull over to let them go by, but they stop a little longer to pray for everyone involved. They pray for the firefighters. They pray for the police that also went by. They pray for the victims because they don't know who they're helping. And that child then says, why doesn't everybody continue to stop and pray for the people when they hear a siren? And the mother says, they don't necessarily know. We know because of what Daddy does, and we know that we want to care, and God calls us to do that. That's part of that family. That's part of what we do. And I grew up also because of a grandfather who was a fire chief, listening to the sirens, stopping to pause and pray for the people involved. So to me, that was natural. But I realized when I had other friends, and I was driving at one point because I had a license, and I pulled over and I prayed. It was so alien to them, and they said, "Wow, I never thought about that." And I thought, I never didn't think about that. It's that type of thing that we need to share. And through these stories in this book, we share some of that so other people can understand, how do we feel, how do we react when this is part of our life, and we've been doing that.
Let's look at the other side of this. The families that have used and are using the devotional, what kind of feedback are you getting from them? And how are you seeing it impact families, neighborhoods, churches, communities, other service families? What impact are you seeing that this has?
People have been letting me know that they just love this devotion, that it's for those who have never been involved like you with any of these callings. They're like, my eyes are so opened. I never knew that. I have so much more of an appreciation. Those who live it just say, thank you. We're able to talk about this. We're getting more tools we can use, and it's really helping our children. They don't feel like they're the only ones in this type of a family, because they're hearing stories of other children in such families. And that, whenever you don't feel alone and you feel other people are walking with you, you feel more loved, and you feel more able to cope with things.
I think the majority of families out there find the concept of a family devotion, just in general. There's so many resources. I'm intimately familiar. I get the pitch for every one of them. But yet, the actual application of it, I think, is lacking. I think that it tends to roll over to mom. Mom then does it when dad's not around, so that dad doesn't feel like he's not doing his job. He comes home from work, and that's not a good time because they've got homework and they've got this and they've got that. So you know it's a good idea. You know it's the right thing to do. You know it's what you should do. But the reality is that a high percentage don't have family devotion. A high percentage have never seen a parent read a Bible. I grew up in a family where we went to synagogue, but we had a family Bible. My mother's 93. I have her Bible. It was given to her in confirmation. It's never been opened except by me. That's so how do we, I mean, it seems simple. It seems simple enough to do. How do we demystify it? How do we make it and incorporate it as, because how many families are having breakfast together? Everybody's grabbing and running and off to the races. So unless you're a homeschool family and they're very, very proud of their regular devotions and they're the ones that are big consumers, or the MOPS group, they're heavily involved in this. But the average working family, what advice do you have for them for when and how to do this?
Well, they do have to choose what time is best for them or what day of the week is best for them. With us, it was before dessert. And we would say, if we don't have time to read God's word and do something with it today, we don't have time for dessert. If we can't have the sweetness of something sweeter than honey in the honeycomb, as the Bible says it is, then we don't have time for another sweetness in our life. And that really motivated our children to be ready, be downstairs, and open to, doing the devotion. But the other thing that happened was children would come over to visit, stay overnight. They would be part of the devotion. They would take it back and talk to their parents. When people would say to me, "Why are your children so great together? Why do they not seem to fight? Why?" All these questions they would ask. I would say, a lot of it, I believe, centers around having family devotions. It's the heart of our family. We not only do it then, but then we can talk about what we read at the dinner table, in a car, and faith becomes the fabric of our life. And then I looked at some of those families that never did that and said, they had a lot more trouble keeping their children in faith when they grew up as adults because it was only a Sunday thing. It seemed unimportant. We have to start thinking, what do we want long-term in our children? If we want faith to be important, it has to be important now in our family life. You can't expect a different outcome when you have the same input.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I know the cost that's involved in not doing it. I personally firsthand don't know the benefit of having done it because I was too busy doing the work of the Lord to take a look at my own family first, and so it became something that became an issue of ministry and became an issue of good parenting. And so one of those things that you look back and say, this I would have done differently. This I would have incorporated into the daily life and found and made the time. But I was seeking after the higher good, the larger community, thinking that was the bigger calling. But it was the salvation of my children and my spouse that really was what I was entrusted with first. And so that's where my responsibility was first. And I think that's a message to fathers out there, that you need to be engaged, especially if you are one who is serving, that when you are there with the family, that you find a way to be involved in these devotions. And moms who are there holding down the house, the fort, while dad's away performing this act of service, to continue to bring that message, so when dad comes home, dad finds the appreciation, the love, and the respect that he was not receiving when he was out there in the world, that he was finding that at home. So it's incredibly important on many levels, and you have my absolute complete support for what you're doing, and an absolute endorsement from us. The book is called 52 Weekly Devotions for Families Called to Serve. It is Karen Whiting, Whiting. And if you go to ignitinganation.com and just click on Karen's name, it will be the first thing you see when you scroll down the page to today's broadcast calendar. You will see Karen's name. Just click on it and order the book right from there. Get a copy for yourself. There's a holiday coming up. It's a great gift to give to all the families that you know. And what a wonderful gift to give to somebody whose family is in a serving area, a fighter fire, a policeman, a military person, and put it in their hands as a gift to let them know that there is hope for them, and that you've been praying for them all along, and this is how you've been having your children include them in your prayers. So Karen Whiting, thank you. Thank you for this great work. Thank you for opening my eyes and our audience eyes to a great need that exists out there in the world. We appreciate you very much.
And thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.